The first one. The first time the silence on the line wasn't just a missed call, but a forgotten day. My day. It landed not like a bombshell, but like a feather. So light, I almost dismissed it. Almost. But feathers, you know, they accumulate. They can smother you if you let them, drift by drift, until the air is thick with unspoken things. I was 67. Not old. Not by my mother's fierce standards, but old enough to expect a call. From him, Daniel, my son. The boy whose first word was a breathy, "Mama," whose tiny hand had fit so perfectly in mine, a small, warm starfish clinging to my finger. I'd baked a cake that year, a small lemon drizzle, his favorite since he was tall enough to peer over the kitchen counter. It sat there, under a glass dome, a sugary monument to a memory he no longer seemed to share. Its yellow crumb a stark contrast to the gray afternoon light. The phone stayed quiet. The silence grew, filled the kitchen, then the whole house. It had its own texture, that silence. Rough. Like unsanded wood. By evening, the cake looked forlorn. Or maybe that was just me, my own reflection caught in the curve of the glass. I told myself, he's busy. Life gets in the way. His new job, that demanding boss. Excuses bloomed in my mind. A desperate little garden I tended, trying to shield myself from the truth already taking root. A truth as cold and hard as the stone in a peach. The first year. Just one. Surely an oversight. A simple, human error. I cut a slice of the lemon cake, ate it standing up, looking out at the roses I'd pruned. Their thorns seemed sharper. Did he even remember I loved yellow roses? Or was that detail, too, lost in the shuffle of his important life? Each tick of the grandfather clock was a beat, a drum signaling, what? Not an end. Surely. Just a pause. A very long, quiet pause. I saved him a piece of cake, wrapped it carefully. It sat in the fridge for 3 days before I threw it out. A small, sticky symbol of something I wasn't ready to name. Neglect? No, that was too harsh, wasn't it? I picked up the phone the next day, dialed his number. His voice, when he answered, was hurried. "Hi, Mum. Everything okay?" And I said, "Yes, dear. Just calling to say hello. What else could I say? Happy belated birthday to me, the mother you forgot." The words wouldn't come. They caught in my throat, sharp and bitter. That was the first year, the beginning of the quiet lessons in letting go. Or perhaps, understanding what had already been let go by him. The sting of it, a small, persistent ache. An ache I would come to know very well. The second year, the silence had a different quality, less shocking, more expected, like a returning ache you recognize. The excuse, when he finally called a week later, prompted by my daughter Sarah, who lived overseas but never forgot, was a business trip. "So swamped, Mum. You know how it is." I did. I knew he was swamped. I also knew phones worked internationally. That a text took 30 seconds. The lemon cake that year was smaller. I ate it with Mrs. Henderson from next door. She didn't ask why Daniel wasn't there. Her kindness was a balm, but it highlighted the absence. By the third year, there was no cake. What was the point? I bought myself a new book, told myself it was a treat, but the pages felt heavy. The phone call came 2 weeks late. "Oh, Mum, God, I'm so sorry. It completely slipped my mind." Slipped, like a fish through careless fingers. My birthday. The day I brought him into this world. Slipped. I imagined it, a small, shiny date, sliding off the calendar of his mind, into the dustbin of forgotten things. Was I becoming one of those forgotten things? A piece of old furniture, familiar, but no longer truly seen? The fourth year, Sarah called, sang happy birthday, her children giggling. Their voices were sunshine. Daniel sent a generic email 3 days later. Subject: Belated wishes. Addressed to Mom. Not Mum. As if our shared intimacy was eroding. The fifth year. Silence. Complete and utter. Not even an email. The pattern wasn't emerging anymore. It had arrived, settled in, made itself comfortable in the spaces he'd vacated. I found myself looking in the mirror more often, searching for the woman he used to see. Where had she gone? Or was it him who had changed so profoundly? The questions looped, each forgotten birthday like a new layer of varnish, obscuring the original portrait of our relationship. Or, perhaps, stripping it away, revealing something raw underneath. The garden of excuses I'd once tended? Barren now. Only the hard, cold truth remained. He just didn't remember. Or worse, didn't care enough. The pain was no longer sharp. It had dulled into a chronic ache, a part of my emotional landscape. And I wondered, quietly, if a heart could forget how to feel, if wounded in the same place, year after year. The sixth year. I almost dared to hope. He'd called the week before, not about my birthday, but about some old university documents he needed. His voice had been warmer. "Thanks, Mum. You're a lifesaver," he'd said. For a dusty piece of paper, I found them, sent them special delivery. A small, foolish seed of hope sprouted. Maybe this time, maybe needing me, would jog his memory. The birthday arrived. The morning post brought bills. No card. I made tea, sat by the window. The phone remained stubbornly silent. Mid-afternoon, it rang. My heart did a ridiculous flutter. "Hello? Mum? It's Daniel." His voice was normal. "Hi, dear," I said. "Listen," he said. "Did you send those papers? The courier says they haven't arrived, and I really need them this afternoon." My breath caught. The papers. That's what this was about. Not the hope. The papers. "Yes, Daniel," I said, my voice flat. "I sent them 2 days ago. Special delivery. I have the receipt." "Oh? Right. Well, can you check the tracking number? It's really important." I put the phone down, found the receipt. My hands trembled, not with age, but with a cold, clarifying anger. I read him the tracking number. He grunted. "Okay, thanks. Gotta go." Click. He was gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of the unsent card, the unsaid wishes. Full of the crushing weight of my foolish hope. The papers were more important. I was a means to an end. A finder of lost things. A keeper of his past, but not a part of his present. That evening, I took down the small, framed photograph of Daniel from the mantelpiece. Him at graduation, arm around my shoulder. I didn't smash it. I just opened the back, slid the photo out, and replaced it with a postcard Sarah had sent. A serene, smiling Buddha. It felt right. The disappointment was a physical thing. A bitter taste. It wasn't just about a forgotten birthday anymore. It was about a forgotten person. Me. And the realization that the boy I remembered perhaps only existed in my memory now. A ghost in the machine of my heart. That glimmer of hope, extinguished so thoroughly it felt like the wick itself had been ripped out. Years 7, 8, 9. They blur a little now. Not because the pain lessened, but because it became a constant, a dull throb. Like living with a chronic illness. You function around it, but it's always there. The forgotten birthdays were no longer individual events, but chapters in a longer, sadder story. A story of gradual erosion. My calls to him became less frequent. What was there to say? His topics, work, investments, fleeting acquaintances, felt alien. My world, my garden, my books, the quiet rhythm of my days seemed to bore him. The distance wasn't just geographical, it was a chasm, dug by years of neglect, deepened by indifference. I stopped expecting. That was the biggest change. Expectation is fragile, isn't it? It needs nurturing, needs to be met halfway. Mine had withered. During those years, other small lights began to flicker. Mrs. Henderson became a regular companion for tea. Young Maya, my new neighbor's daughter, started visiting, ostensibly to help with my roses, but mostly to chat. Her bright energy was a tonic. She'd ask about Daniel. I'd tell edited stories of when he was little. I couldn't tell a child about the man he'd become. It felt like betraying that little boy. And then there was the community center. A flyer. Volunteers needed for the community garden. My roses were thriving. Perhaps I could offer something. I went, hesitantly. It was run down. The garden mostly weeds. But the people, real. Mrs. Petrova, who taught me borscht. Mr. Singh, who could fix anything. Children, hands in soil, faces alight with a sprouting seed. I found a place there. A purpose. My hands, so often reaching for a silent phone, were now busy tilling soil, planting hope. The weight of Daniel's forgetting didn't disappear, but it was counterbalanced. I had other lives to touch, connections to tend. These were roots, too, shallow at first, but growing stronger, anchoring me. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in the community center's greenhouse, surrounded by new growth, and see a woman I almost didn't recognize. Still me, but with a new layer, resilience perhaps, or the quiet dignity of someone who, if one door kept slamming, would find another, one opening onto a sunnier path. The silence from Daniel was still there, but it no longer defined my world. My world was expanding, even as his part in it shrank. The 10th year. A decade. Such a round, significant number. 10 years since he'd remembered. 10 years of silence. On that particular day, in April, it felt like a milestone, but not one to celebrate. An ending, or perhaps a threshold. I woke that morning, the 10th anniversary of the forgetting, and the sun was shining. It streamed through my window, illuminating dancing dust motes. For a moment, ordinary. Then I remembered the date, April 14th. The ordinariness fractured. No cake, of course. No expectation of a call. Those rituals died long ago. Instead, a peculiar calm. A stillness. Like the air before a storm. But this storm was internal, already past, leaving this quiet. I made tea, sat by the window. Roses just beginning to bud, tight green fists. 10 years. I said the words aloud, to the empty room. 10 years. They hung in the air, heavy. It wasn't about gifts, you understand. Never about that. About the thought, the acknowledgement. Remembering I exist, that I am your mother, that this day once meant something. 10 years of being a non-event in his life. The accumulation, feather by feather, had become a weight too heavy to ignore. No longer just oversights. A statement. A choice he had made, over and over. And in that quiet room, sun shining, roses waiting, I realized I had a choice too. I could continue as the forgotten mother, a ghost. Or I could choose myself. Acknowledge the truth of our fractured bond, and act. The door I had kept ajar for him in my heart. For a decade. hoping he would walk through. I felt it click shut. Not a slam, not anger, but a quiet, decisive click, like a well-made lock, a sense of release, strange, sad freedom. Pain was still there, a deep, old bruise, but overlaid now with clarity, resolution. 10 years was enough. Enough silence, enough neglect, enough. Later I went to the community center, children planting sunflowers. Small hands, earnest, patting soil, infectious laughter. I watched them. Something settled in me. This was where life was. Growth, where a legacy could mean something real. The 10th year. The year I stopped waiting for Daniel to remember me and started to remember myself. And to think, really think, about what my life and its eventual end should truly mean. The community center became my sanctuary, then my cause. Not just a place to pass time, a place where time was invested. The little patch of weeds had transformed into a vibrant, sprawling garden. We grew vegetables for the community kitchen, flowers that brightened the entrance. My roses, cuttings from my own garden, climbed the walls. This garden, unlike the one of my excuses for Daniel, thrived. It asked for work, care, and gave back tenfold. Each tomato, each zinnia, a small tangible victory, a testament to shared effort. I saw lives changing. Young Jamie, heading for trouble, found focus tending herbs. He had a gentle touch, patience. Reminded me sometimes of a younger Daniel, before ambition outgrew connection. A fleeting shadow, chased by Jamie's pride in his basil. Mrs. Almeida, widowed, found solace kneading dough, her stories weaving into her work, sharing grief, finding comfort. And the children, always the children. Ilara, look! A ladybug! Uncomplicated joy. They didn't care about my age, my sorrows. Just someone who would listen, show them a weed from a seedling. I started helping with their reading group. A child mastering a word. Light in their eyes when a story clicked, precious things. These were the calls I answered now, needs I met. Where my energy flowed, my heart resonated. Daniel called occasionally, usually needing something. A signature, information, an ear for his latest triumph or frustration. I was polite, helpful, but the old warmth, maternal indulgence, gone. Replaced by calm, professional courtesy. Did he notice? I don't know. He never commented, too absorbed in his own narrative. My life had rerouted. In this new soil, this community garden, I wasn't an afterthought. I was Ilara, valued. The assets I had, the house Tom and I worked for, savings meticulously accrued, they took on new meaning. Not legacy for a son who forgot family, but potential. Potential to nurture this new garden, ensure it flourished. The idea took root slowly. What if my legacy wasn't blood, but belonging? Fostering growth where needed, appreciated? Radical for my generation. But the past 10 years taught that some traditions, some expectations, aren't sacred. Some are empty vessels. My life, my legacy, deserved to be full. The thought of changing my will, not a thunderclap. More like the slow creep of dawn. At first I dismissed it. Disloyal, unmotherly. Society expects a mother to provide, unconditionally. But, I'd ask, what is a condition? Is 10 years of consistent neglect not a condition changing the landscape of love, of obligation? Is the slow erasure of one's mother not a profound statement? I wrestled with it, often before sunrise, ghosts of memory active. I'd remember Daniel as a boy, scraped knees, fierce hugs. Love for that boy, Still there, an indelible mark. But the man he became? A stranger wearing my son's face? A stranger who dismantled the bridge between us, then seemed surprised he couldn't cross. What would Tom have said? My dear Tom, gone 15 years, adored Daniel, but also a man of fairness, wouldn't have stood for disrespect. I imagined his voice calm. Ilara, do what feels right. True to the life we built, values we shared. And Daniel had already inherited so much: education, stable upbringing, unwavering early support, given the tools. What he built, his responsibility. The community center, on the other hand, built futures daily, with so little, patched, mended, stretched every penny. What could they achieve with a significant foundation? Children's bright faces, Jamie's hope for his herb garden, Mrs. Almeida's rediscovered laughter, powerful images. A counter-narrative to Daniel's silence. One day, Maya, my young neighbor, brought a drawing. My house, me in the garden, enormous smiling sunflowers. "This is you, Ilara," she said. "You make everything grow." Innocent words, a revelation. Make everything grow. That's what I wanted my legacy to be. Not a reward for neglect, but a continuation of care. That afternoon I called Mr. Davies, my solicitor. Surprised when I said I wanted to discuss my will. "Everything all right, Ilara?" "Everything," I said. And for the first time it felt true. Is becoming clear. The decision, once momentous, fraught, now simple, inevitable, like a river finding its course. Not revenge. Revenge is bitter. I had no taste for it. This was justice. Poetic justice, perhaps. Redirecting resources to where they'd be valued, where they'd bloom. Mr. Davies' office, polished wood, scent of old paper, a place of gravitas. He listened patiently, steepled fingers on his blotter, as I laid out my intentions. I didn't share the full story of 10 forgotten birthdays, the decade of quiet heartaches. Simply stated my wish. Bulk of my estate, house, savings, to Elmwood Community Center. A small token amount for Daniel. Enough to show he wasn't entirely forgotten legally, but not enough to signify inheritance of love. Enough, perhaps, to make him pause, wonder, or not. Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow slightly. "Significant departure from your previous will, Ilara. Quite certain?" "I am," I replied, voice steady. Certainty. A cool, smooth stone in my hand. He asked necessary questions. Undue influence. Soundness of mind. Answered calmly. My mind had never been sounder. Waded through years of emotional fog, reached clarity. As he drafted new clauses, pen scratching, only sound. I felt profound agency. My words, my wishes, shaping my final act. A quiet, potent power. Thought of Daniel, briefly. Not the man, but the boy who believed I was magic. A pang, yes, mother's heart is stubborn. Nostalgic ache for something lost, not regret for this decision. That boy was gone. The man remaining showed me, unequivocally, who he was. What I meant, or didn't. Pen stopped. Mr. Davies read revised passages. Formal, legalistic, but beneath. Echo of my resolve. Elwood Community Center. For continuation of its programs. Upkeep of its garden. Benefit of all who find solace and support. Sounded right. Felt right. Signing my name. Like closing a very old, heavy book. Filled with unmet expectations. Quiet grief. And opening a new one, pages blank, promising growth, community, a legacy rippling outwards, a legacy of making things grow. Leaving his office, city air felt lighter. Weight I'd carried. Unspoken burden of Daniel's neglect. hadn't vanished, but shifted, no longer solely on my shoulders. I had taken control of my narrative. It would end not with a forgotten birthday, but a flourishing garden, tended by many hands, for years. That, I thought, was a good story. A good ending. Or rather, a good new beginning. I often wonder what that day will be like. The day the will is read. I won't be there, of course, but I can picture it. Daniel, summoned by Mr. Davies. A flicker of curiosity, or detached entitlement. He'll expect the house, the savings. It's what sons expect, isn't it? Especially sons who believe themselves sole inheritors of a life they barely participated in. Will there be shock? Oh, I imagine so. Stunned silence, as the solicitor reads the clauses, the careful redirection of what Daniel considered his birthright. Anger? Almost certainly. Accusations, perhaps, that I was manipulated. Not in my right mind. Usual refrains of those whose expectations are overturned. I've left a letter with Mr. Davies for Daniel, not of anger or recrimination. I've had my fill, a simple letter. It mentions the 10 years. Not in detail, just the fact. A quiet statement of a long truth. It speaks of the community center, what it meant to me. Wishes him well in his life, the life he chose, separate from mine. Will he understand it? Truly understand the depth of the chasm he created? Years of quiet signals ignored? Or see it as a final, inexplicable act of a mother he never knew? I suspect the latter. Easier to cast blame than look inward. Acknowledge one's own part. Sometimes, in the quiet evening, I try to feel what he might feel. Betrayal? But who betrayed whom, Daniel? The mother who finally acknowledged her son's indifference? Or the son who allowed a decade of her life, her celebrations, her very existence to slip from his mind year after year? The irony. He will remember me then. Oh, yes. On that day, he will remember me very clearly. My name on his lips, in his thoughts, perhaps for the first time with real intensity in years. A bitter sort of remembrance, I suppose. Not cherished memories, but the stark glare of consequence. But remembrance, nonetheless. And perhaps, in years that follow, a different understanding might dawn. A belated realization of what was lost. Not money, but connection. Love. Or perhaps not. It doesn't really matter anymore. My peace is made. My legacy chosen. Not in his fleeting, resentful memory, but in laughter of children in a thriving garden. Comforting hum of a community. That is the inheritance I choose. And I am content. Utterly content. And so, the day came. As all days must. Mr. Davies handled everything with quiet efficiency. I imagine the reading of the will was brief, stark, for Daniel. The letter I left. No accusations, only facts. 10 Aprils, unremarked. 10 cakes unshared, then unbaked. 10 silences where a call should have been. It stated a garden neglected for a decade cannot yield a devoted harvest for the one who withheld water. My true harvest, I explained, would be cultivated elsewhere. At the Elmwood Community Center, things are blooming. I like to think of it that way. News travels, even to the quiet place I now rest. Young Jamie, they say, is lead gardener. His passion inspiring new children with muddy hands, bright eyes. They've built a new greenhouse, the Alara Wing, though I only asked it be used well. Filled with seedlings, promise. Mrs. Almeida's baking classes are oversubscribed. Sent of her bread a warm welcome. The reading group expanded. More books, eager minds. They tell me there's a small plaque by the rose bushes I first planted, from my own garden. Ilera's roses. May they always bloom, more than I could have asked. Remembered not for bitterness, but beauty. Growth. Daniel? I hear he was surprised. Too mild a word. Contested briefly. Lawyers made noises. Undue influence. Mother's grief. But Mr. Davies was thorough. My letter. Clear-minded visits. Decade of involvement with the centre. It stood firm. The challenge faded. I wonder if he ever visits the centre. Walks past the garden. Sees children play. Hears laughter. Looks at my roses. Feels anything. Regret? Understanding? Or cold ashes of resentment? I don't know. Truly, it no longer occupies me. My concern is for the living, growing, for the community that embraced a forgotten mother, gave her belonging, a place to make her mark. What is inheritance, really? Material goods, property, coin, or transmission of values, love, a life lived with purpose? I chose the latter. To invest in a future where connection is cherished, where everyone feels seen, valued, where no one waits 10 years for a sign they matter. My peace is profound. Peace of a well-tended garden after rain, soil dark, rich, ready for new life. Peace of knowing while one door closed, many opened. Doors to brighter rooms, warmer hearths. That, in the end, is a legacy worthy of any mother's heart, a legacy of light, enduring growth. My story, not just about a son who forgot, about a mother who remembered herself and found a way to plant seeds of hope that will flourish for generations. That, I think, is a good way to be remembered. Don't you?